This is North Georgia's News Talk.
WDUN. This girl is on fire.
Coming up at 8 o'clock tonight, MRN's NASCAR Live. Story broke today that Kurt Busch would be running both the Indianapolis 500 and the Coca-Cola 600 on the same day. Pretty big story. I'm sure you'll hear more about that coming up tonight at 8 right here on AM 550, FM 102.9 WDUN. This portion of Game On with moi, Katie B. Davis, at 6 minutes after 7 o'clock, brought to you by Nichols Body Shop. From dents and dings to major collision damage, Nichols Body Shop has you covered, and that includes a free estimate, folks, no matter how big or small the problem. Nichols Body Shop, quality repairs, old-fashioned service on Atlanta Highway, just down from the square in Flowery Branch. We're about to tackle a tough topic as we continue this Tuesday edition of Game On, and that's the use of the N-word and the NFL's agenda to ban it. Helping me in this discussion, Bill Courtney, a business owner, yes, but also a former football coach in Memphis for the Manassas Tigers, an inner-city school. His 2009 season filmed and resulted in an Oscar-winning documentary that I would be remiss not to recommend. It's called Undefeated. Make sure you go look it up. It's even on YouTube, but you can find it on Netflix as well. I want to get real to start, Coach, and I hope that you're having a great evening. Thanks so much for being here with us.
Thanks for having me, Eddie.
I want to get real to start, and based at least on the documentary, you're someone who doesn't shy away from realness. What does a white man talking to a white radio show host, what do we know about the N-word? Why should the two of us be having this discussion?
Well, there's a number of reasons we should be having a conversation, but first you have to understand it's an amazingly complicated conversation. It's more than just a word. The N-word is what slaves referred to their property as, and it indicated that I can buy you, I can sell you, I can manipulate you, I can dispose of you, and when you're talking about another human being in that regard, you're treating that human being as less than human and as property. And for that reason, I find the word apprehensible and disgusting. And the use of the word, I feel like, desecrates the memory and devalues the memory of many, many black and white brave Americans who in the 60s gave their liberty and in many cases their life so that African Americans didn't have to be referred to as less than human and were seen as equal as they should be. And every time I hear the word, I think about the origin of it, what it was used to do, to put another human being in a less than human place, and I think about the sacrifices of many men and women who led us to not a perfect place and a still developing place, but a much better place, and how using it desecrates their sacrifice and their memory. So, I know there's a black perspective with regard to the word, and I'm not an idiot. I get that it can be used as a term of endearment, but in my world, I think there's no place for it.
And I couldn't agree with you more, Coach Courtney. That word has never been in my lexicon. I was raised better than that, as were many people that I associate myself with. And I played sports in high school and was surrounded by black athletes, girls today that I consider some of my dearest friends. And I never heard them use it with each other. And the same holds true for my father's football players when he coached high school football. It was never something that was used in that community. That has changed, though. The word has evolved, and I hesitate to use the word evolve, but the word has evolved. I want to hear from you. Does the NFL have the right to ban the N-word? And if they do try to do that, then why not ban all vulgar language?
I get the point, and you're right. Listen, my parents tried to censor Elvis Presley because he gyrated.
Yeah.
And every generation develops and evolves. And I get that we can be a little old school talking about it. I get that the younger generation today recognizes a difference in the word ending in ER and the word ending in A. I get all that. And I also think some of the folks that are fighting back against the NFL's banning of the word are saying, this is the same NFL that won't acknowledge that concussions have led to dementia. And this is the same NFL that allows the Washington to continue to be Redskins, which is unbelievably abrasive to Indians. And it's the same NFL that does things that, and then they want to come out and say you can't use the N word, and it seems hypocritical and talking out of both sides of the mouth. I get all that, and I agree that why would we put this word down? But what about calling a homosexual a faggot? How come that isn't just as abrasive? Or what about the use of GD to a devoutly Christian person? And so I get that it's a complicated issue, and it's a bigger issue than just whether you can say the word or not. I like the fact that this is now a conversation. Because,
well said, yeah.
Because if all right, in hip-hop, there are songs that have the word ending in A in it throughout it. And there are young African-American and young white kids listening to that stuff together that are friends. And if it's permeating into your entertainment, into your industry, and you hear it and you sing it, and it's actually the titles of songs, and then you expect for those kids to then, when they use that word and other people don't understand their dynamic and they hear it and get offended from it, it creates a double standard in a very difficult situation. Therefore, I applaud that it's being brought up. I applaud that the conversation's being had about it. But I will go back to this. I have a problem. I get the problem with a young African-American man saying, you can't tell me that I can't use that word. I'm fine with that. I would rather have the conversation that says, listen, I don't like the word, and here's why, for the reasons that I opened this conversation with. And I'd like you to think about that and maybe see if that's something that you can agree with and adopt. Rather than me saying you can't use it, here's why I don't think it should be used. What do you think about it? And it doesn't have to be a debate or an argument. It can just be a conversation that continues to narrow the divide that continues to hurt this country.
I love that you say it can be a conversation and not a debate. I want to know from you. You coached in inner city Memphis, Manassas High School. Your team was black. It was all black. How did you police that?
In 7 years, I had one white kid. So,
yeah, okay, sorry. My bad. One white kid. How did you, though? But how did you police it? Because certainly you had to have been around it, had to have heard it, and you come across as a man that doesn't, take kindly to that.
My players, my second year, said, Coach, you're my N-word. And they meant it with all the affection and love. I mean, truthfully, it's about as good as a compliment that a 38-year-old white dude can get from a young African-American inner city kid as there is. And,
that's so true.
And I knew that.
Yeah.
But I had a rule that you can't use that word in any way. But I didn't just say that's the rule and start running laps if you screw with it. I explained to them, I taught them that there's a disconnect between the generation in the 60s who remember pictures of African Americans strung up hanging from trees, and that remember pictures of 3,000 troops at the University of Mississippi just so James Meredith could go to school there, and remember pictures of April 4th, 1968, when Martin Luther King lay in a pool of blood on the Rome Hotel's balcony. That generation remembers that, and they remember the fight, and they remember when you went in a restaurant, there was a black side and a white side, and they remember those atrocities. And the generation coming up now has been removed from that, and so it's our job as mentors and as adults to say, hey, I'm not going to tell you what you can and can't do, because if I tell you can't, that's gonna migrate you more to want to do it. Because I was the same way when I was a kid. But I'm going to tell you why I don't appreciate it, and I think you should think about it. And once we did a study and looked in the mirror a little bit about what that is, we found out that you can say, "You're my man." That idiot, that guy, that bud, he's my, there were other words that worked. And my team adopted the principle that we're not going to use that word, not because I told them to, but because I explained why. And they made the decisions that, yeah, man, we owe it to the people that came before us to do better. And I think if the NFL, instead of mandate, I'll tell you something else. It should come from the players' union. It shouldn't come from, you said be real. You got a large populace of wealthy white people owning and managing NFL teams across the country that are telling their young, predominantly African-American, passionate, energetic athletes what they can and can't say. That doesn't wash, man. It doesn't wash well with them, and I get that. I applaud that there's a conversation, but I would love for the conversation about the history behind that word and the degradation of that word to be had by the players' union, the players themselves, and for a little leadership to happen in that regard. And maybe the conversation can lead to better understanding of why it's such a bad word.
I couldn't agree with you more. We're talking with Bill Courtney, his football team in Memphis, Manassas Tigers, the source of a documentary in 2009, an Oscar-winning documentary called Undefeated. Could not agree with you more. This is not for the NFL to dictate. The NFL is 70% black. The players are 70%. 70% of the NFL players are black. It needs to come from them. If the word usage is going to be eradicated, it needs to come from there, not the owners dictating it, not the coaches dictating it. You got to have respect for yourself.
You're right, but Katie, it's more than just a black-white issue. It's a generational issue. I mean, the owners, they're 60, 70-year-old guys. The players are 23, 20. There's two generations that separate them. It's as much a black-white issue as it is a generational issue that there's a disconnect, that people don't understand one another. Instead of sitting down and talking about it and each understanding the other and coming to a consensus through a players' union and through conversation and through a civil conversation about what this really is, then you might get somewhere. You just can't mandate it, but it doesn't change the fact that I believe, and I'm fine going on record saying I believe, it shouldn't be used because of the reasons I said earlier. But how that conversation takes place and how we arrive at that conclusion can be much better orchestrated.
Man, I knew I liked you in that documentary. You're something else. Hey, listen, I'm a big fan of yours, and I appreciate you being on with us tonight and having the conversation during Game On with me, Katie B. Davis, about the N-word in the NFL.
Katie, shameless plug. I just finished a book called Against the Grain, and it discusses that one of my rules was not to use the N-word and why, and it has this conversation. It's 3 pages out of 200. The book explores 14 other tenets and fundamentals in business and family and social life, as well as sports, that I think are important. And if you like this conversation, there's a lot more conversations to be had in Against the Grain, and I hope you'll check it out.
It's not a shameless plug when I've already said what a fan I am of yours. I'll definitely be checking out the book. Bill Courtney, thanks so much for being on with us tonight. Keep on keeping on, man.
Thanks for having me, Katie.
Absolutely.
Bye-bye.
Absolutely.